3 days ago, I walked into what I thought was my home and discovered that my husband, Jeff, and my childhood best friend, Grace, were having an affair and that she was pregnant with his baby. The worst part is that they actually expected me to continue sending money from Europe to support them both while they played house together. I need to explain the background because this situation is completely insane. Jeff was diagnosed with a rare form of cystic fibrosis when he was 24, about 2 years into our marriage. The insurance company denied coverage for the experimental treatments he needed, claiming they were investigational and not medically necessary. We appealed multiple times and got denied every single time. The lawyers we consulted said we had almost no chance of winning a lawsuit against them because the treatment protocols weren't FDA approved yet. The medical bills were crushing us financially because the treatments cost around $4,000 per month. And that was just for the medications, not including the specialist visits and monitoring tests that happened every few weeks. We had already burned through our savings and were looking at bankruptcy when I got offered a position with an international consulting firm that would pay me almost triple what I was making domestically. The catch was that I had to be based in their Munich office for at least 2 years, possibly longer, depending on the project timeline. Jeff and I discussed it extensively and decided that I should take the job because it was literally the only way we could afford to keep him alive. I was sending home about 40% of my salary every month, which covered his medical expenses and allowed him to maintain a decent quality of life. The plan was for me to stay in Munich until we had enough money saved up to either find better insurance coverage or until the treatments became more widely available and covered by our original insurance. Since Jeff couldn't work full-time because of his condition and needed someone to help him with daily tasks and medical appointments, Grace volunteered to move in with him and take care of everything while I was overseas. Grace had been my best friend since we were 8 years old, and I trusted her completely because she had always been there for both of us throughout Jeff's diagnosis and treatment journey. She had even helped us research treatment options and drove Jeff to appointments when I was working extra hours to save money before I left for Europe. I thought this arrangement was perfect because Jeff would have someone reliable taking care of him. Grace would have free housing since she was between jobs and her lease was ending anyway. And I could focus on my work knowing that the most important person in my life was being looked after by someone who genuinely cared about his well-being. We video called every day, and Jeff always seemed to be doing well. Grace would give me updates about his appointments and medication schedules. I had been planning to surprise Jeff by coming home early for his birthday, which is next week. I managed to get time off work and booked a flight without telling either of them because I wanted it to be a complete surprise. When I walked through the front door using my key, I found them cuddled up on the couch watching a movie together, and Grace was obviously pregnant and showing quite a bit. The first thing Jeff said when he saw me was, "This isn't what it looks like," which was absolutely ridiculous because Grace was clearly pregnant and they were holding hands. When I asked how long this had been going on, Grace started crying and said that they had developed feelings for each other about 4 months ago and that she was about 5 months pregnant with his baby. Jeff immediately started explaining that they had been planning to tell me about their relationship but wanted to wait until I came home permanently because they didn't want to disrupt my work situation. He said that they had talked about it extensively and decided that the best solution would be for me to continue working in Munich and sending money home, while they figured out how to make their new family work financially. Grace actually said that I should be understanding about their situation because she had been sacrificing her own life to take care of Jeff while I was living it up in Europe. She claimed that it was only natural for them to develop feelings for each other since they were spending so much time together, and that I should appreciate everything she had done for our family instead of being upset about their relationship. The unbelievable part was when Jeff suggested that we didn't need to get divorced immediately. He claimed it would be more convenient for everyone if I remained his legal spouse so he could stay on my health insurance. While we worked out a more permanent arrangement, he said that since Grace wasn't working and couldn't get insurance that would cover his condition, it made financial sense for me to stay married to him at least until after the baby was born, and they could figure out their long-term plans. I told them both that they had completely lost their minds if they thought I was going to continue funding their affair and supporting their baby while they lived in my house and used my money to build a life together. Jeff got defensive and said that I was being unreasonable because his medical condition meant he couldn't survive without the expensive treatments that my salary was paying for. Grace backed him up, saying that breaking up their family would essentially be sentencing Jeff to death since they couldn't afford his medications without my financial support. I left the house immediately and am currently staying in a hotel while I figure out what to do next. I'm planning to file for divorce as soon as possible, and I'm going to fight any attempts he makes to get alimony from me. I'm also going to consult with a lawyer about whether I can recover any of the money I invested in our joint accounts and household expenses over the past year and a half while I was supporting him from overseas. The thing that makes me angriest is that they clearly planned this whole situation and were hoping to manipulate me into continuing to pay for their lifestyle while they started their new family together. Grace even had the nerve to suggest that I should be happy for them because they found love during such a difficult time. As if I was supposed to celebrate the fact that my husband and best friend betrayed me while I was working myself to death in a foreign country to keep him alive. I know that some people will probably say that I should have seen this coming, or that long-distance relationships never work out. But I genuinely trusted both of them and thought we were all working toward the same goal of getting Jeff healthy enough for me to come home permanently. I never imagined that they would take advantage of my absence and my financial support to build a relationship behind my back and then expect me to keep funding it after they got caught. Right now, I'm just trying to process everything that happened and figure out the best way to protect myself legally and financially. I'm definitely getting divorced, and I'm probably going to have to quit my job in Munich and come back to the United States permanently to deal with this situation. I just can't believe that the two people I trusted most in the world could betray me like this and then act like I was the one being unreasonable for not wanting to support their affair. Update 1. It's been a week since I discovered Jeff and Grace's affair, and I've made some significant progress in getting my life sorted out. I moved out of the hotel and am currently staying with my parents while I look for a divorce lawyer and figure out my next steps. I found 3 different family law attorneys who specialize in divorce cases involving medical expenses and spousal support. And I'm meeting with all of them this week to decide who I want to represent me. Based on my initial consultations, it looks like I have a good chance of avoiding any alimony payments to Jeff because of the adultery and because I can prove that I was the primary financial contributor to our household while he was having an affair with Grace. The lawyers also think I might be able to recover some of the money I sent home over the past year and a half, especially the funds that went into our joint savings account and household improvement projects. I kept detailed records of all my transfers, and I have documentation showing exactly how much money I contributed to our joint expenses while I was working overseas. I've also started the process of removing Jeff from my health insurance policy, which will take effect at the end of this month. I contacted my insurance company and explained that I'm filing for divorce due to adultery, and they confirmed that I can remove him as soon as the divorce paperwork is filed. Jeff has tried calling me several times, but I'm not answering his calls, and I've blocked both him and Grace on social media. My parents have been incredibly supportive, and they're letting me stay with them for as long as I need to get back on my feet. They've also offered to help me with legal expenses if necessary, though I should be able to cover everything myself. Since I've been saving, the situation with my job in Munich is actually better than I expected. When I explained the circumstances to my supervisor, she informed me that the company has been looking to expand its domestic operations. As a result, they are allowing me to transfer to their Chicago office, albeit with a pay cut and some benefits removed. This means I won't have to search for a new job while dealing with the divorce proceedings. I've been reflecting on how fortunate I am to have discovered the affair when I did. Grace's pregnancy would have eventually made their betrayal obvious. If I had stayed in Munich for several more months without knowing what was happening, they could have been planning their story and potentially hiding assets or making financial decisions that would have been harder for me to reverse later. I also realized that Jeff and Grace probably thought they had more time to figure out how to break the news to me because my original plan was to stay in Munich for at least another 6 months. The fact that I surprised them by coming home early for Jeff's birthday meant they didn't have time to coordinate their story or prepare for my reaction. My parents have been helping me sort through all the financial documents and joint accounts to ensure I have everything I need for the divorce proceedings. We discovered that Jeff had been using our joint credit card to buy items for Grace, including prenatal vitamins and maternity clothes. This will definitely strengthen my case when it comes to proving that he was spending marital assets on his affair partner. I'm filing for divorce this week, and I also plan to request temporary orders that will prevent him from accessing our joint accounts or making any major financial decisions while the divorce is pending. I haven't heard anything from Grace since the day I caught them, but my parents mentioned that her mother called yesterday to apologize for her daughter's actions. Apparently, Grace's parents are completely disgusted by what she did and have told her they won't support her financially during her pregnancy or help with the baby once it's born. It's strange to think that just 2 weeks ago, I believed I had a loving marriage and a loyal best friend who was helping me through a difficult time. Now, I'm planning a divorce and cutting ties with someone who has been part of my life for over 20 years. However, I'm starting to feel optimistic about my future because I know I'll be much better off without people who are willing to betray my trust and take advantage of my generosity. Update 2. I filed for divorce yesterday and have officially quit my job in Munich. The past week and a half has been filled with legal paperwork and major life decisions, but I feel much more in control of my situation now that I've taken decisive action. My attorney has filed the divorce petition along with requests for temporary orders that will protect my assets while the case is pending. We're asking the court to divide all marital property equally, but we are also requesting that I be reimbursed for the money I contributed to household expenses and Jeff's medical treatments while he was having an affair with Grace. The temporary orders also include a provision that prevents Jeff from incurring any new debt in my name or accessing our joint accounts without my permission. My lawyer explained that this is standard practice in divorce cases involving adultery, as it prevents the cheating spouse from spending marital assets on their affair partner or hiding money before the final property division. Jeff's parents showed up at my parents' house 2 days ago wanting to discuss the divorce. At first, they tried to convince me that Jeff and Grace's relationship was just a temporary phase brought on by the stress of his medical condition and my absence. His mother actually suggested that if I came back home and worked on our marriage, Jeff would realize that his feelings for Grace weren't real and they would break up. When I explained that I wasn't interested in reconciling with someone who had been lying to me for months and expecting me to financially support his affair, Jeff's father became much more direct about their true concerns. He admitted that they were worried about how Jeff would pay for his medical treatments without my income and insurance coverage. Jeff's parents then suggested that I should consider delaying the divorce and work out some kind of arrangement where I would continue to help with his medical expenses until he could find another solution. His mother even proposed that Jeff should be required to break up with Grace and that Grace should be forced to terminate her pregnancy so that Jeff and I could work on rebuilding our marriage. I told them that their suggestions were completely inappropriate and that I wasn't going to sacrifice my own well-being or continue being manipulated. Just because Jeff has my father got angry and accused me of being selfish. He claimed that I clearly never really cared about Jeff if I was willing to walk away when he needed me the most. I reminded them that I had spent the last year and a half working in a foreign country, sending most of my salary home to pay for Jeff's treatments, while he was busy building a relationship with another woman. I also pointed out that they had never offered to help with his medical expenses themselves. After that conversation, Jeff's parents left, but not before his mother expressed her hope that I would reconsider my decision. As they didn't know how else Jeff would survive without my financial support, it was clear that they weren't concerned about my emotional well-being or the betrayal I had experienced. They were just worried about losing the financial stability that my job provided for their son. The situation with Grace's family has been completely different. Her parents reached out to apologize for their daughter's behavior and informed me that they would be cutting off all financial support for her, including her college tuition and living expenses. Grace's mother said they were ashamed of what their daughter had done and couldn't understand how she could betray a friendship that had lasted over 20 years. Her parents also stated that they wouldn't support the baby once it is born because they disapprove of how the pregnancy came about. Her father emphasized that they had raised Grace to have better values, and expressed disappointment that she chose to destroy a marriage and a friendship for a relationship that might not even last. The financial impact on both Jeff and Grace is already becoming evident. Without my income, Jeff can't afford his full treatment regimen and has had to switch to a less expensive medication that isn't as effective. Grace has been trying to find work, but she is struggling because she's pregnant and lacks recent job experience or marketable skills. My lawyer mentioned that Jeff will likely request spousal support during the divorce proceedings, but she is confident we can successfully fight it because of the adultery. She also noted that Jeff's spending of marital assets on Grace during their affair will work in my favor when it comes to property division. I'm starting my new job in Chicago next week and have found a small apartment near the office that I can afford comfortably on my own. It feels good to finally be making plans for my future instead of constantly worrying about the financial and medical needs of others. The hardest part about this entire situation has been accepting that the person I thought I was married to doesn't actually exist. The Jeff I thought I knew would never have taken advantage of my love and concern for his health to manipulate me into funding his affair. The Grace I thought was my best friend would never have betrayed 20 years of friendship for a relationship with my husband, but I'm beginning to see that I am better off discovering their true characters now, rather than continuing to sacrifice my own well-being for people who are willing to take advantage of my generosity and loyalty. I look forward to building a new life, where I am not constantly worried about supporting others who don't appreciate what I do for them. Update. Jeff agreed to all the divorce terms and signed the paperwork a month ago, which means we just have to wait out the 60-day waiting period required in our state before the divorce becomes final. I'm honestly surprised he didn't try to contest the property division or request spousal support, but my lawyer believes he realized he didn't have a strong legal position given the circumstances of our separation. Jeff had been asking to meet with me in person to discuss the divorce terms, but I refused because I didn't see any reason to have a face-to-face conversation with someone who had been lying to me for months. I told him through our lawyers that he could communicate with me about necessary legal matters via his attorney, but that I wasn't interested in any personal discussions about our marriage or his relationship with Grace. Yesterday afternoon, Jeff showed up at my parents' house, even though I had made it clear that I didn't want to see him. My parents weren't home at the time, and I was in the backyard reading when I heard someone calling my name from the front of the house. When I walked around to see who it was, I found Jeff standing on the front lawn, yelling for me to come talk to him. He started apologizing, admitting to his mistakes, and insisting that our marriage could still be saved if I was willing to work with him. But as he spoke, it became clear to me he had become completely delusional about the whole situation. He told me that I was actually the reason he and Grace had found each other. My absence had created a situation where they were forced to rely on each other for emotional support. Jeff claimed that if I had been a better wife and found a way to stay home to take care of him instead of taking the job in Munich, he never would have developed feelings for Grace. He said that my decision to prioritize my career over our marriage had created the circumstances that led to their affair. So, according to him, I was partially responsible for what happened between them. At that moment, I completely lost my temper and went outside to confront him. I told him that I had taken the job in Munich specifically to pay for his medical treatments and keep him alive, and that blaming me for his affair was the most manipulative and ridiculous thing I had ever heard. I reminded him that Grace was supposed to be my best friend and that they had both betrayed my trust while I was working myself to death to support them. Jeff kept interrupting me, trying to justify his behavior by saying that I didn't understand how difficult it had been for him to be sick and alone while I was living in Europe. He insisted that Grace had been there for him in ways that I couldn't be because of the distance, and that their relationship had developed naturally due to the time they spent together. I told him that plenty of couples manage long relationships without cheating on each other, and that he was making excuses for behavior that was completely unacceptable, regardless of the circumstances. I also pointed out that he and Grace had been planning to continue their affair indefinitely, while expecting me to keep paying for their lifestyle, which showed that they weren't sorry about what they had done. They were just sorry they got caught. When Jeff started saying that I was being unreasonable, and that I should be more understanding about his medical situation, I slapped him across the face and told him to get off my parents' property, and never contact me again, except for necessary legal communications. He looked shocked that I had hit him, but he got in his car and left without saying anything else. I called my lawyer immediately after Jeff left, to let her know what had happened and to ensure that he's showing up at my parents' house unannounced wouldn't cause any problems with the divorce proceedings. She said that his behavior could actually work in my favor if he continued to try to contact me directly instead of going through his attorney, as it showed he wasn't respecting my wishes or following proper legal procedures. My parents came home about an hour after Jeff left, and I told them what had happened. My father said he wished he had been there because he would have told Jeff to leave immediately, instead of letting him stay on the property long enough to upset me. My mother was worried that Jeff might try to come back, so we decided to install a security camera system and contact the police if he showed up again. I'm feeling better about slapping Jeff, even though I know that physical violence isn't usually the best way to handle conflicts. But hearing him blame me for his affair and act like I was the one who had caused our marriage problems was so infuriating that I couldn't control my reaction. He had been taking advantage of my love and financial support for months while building a relationship with my best friend, and then he had the nerve to suggest it was somehow my fault. The 60-day waiting period should be over by the end of next month, which means I'll officially be divorced and completely free of any legal ties to Jeff. I'm already making plans for how I want to rebuild my life once this whole situation is behind me. And I'm excited about the possibility of starting fresh without having to worry about supporting someone who was taking advantage of my generosity. Update 4. The 60-day waiting period is almost over, and I'll be officially divorced from Jeff next week. I've been settling into my new life in Chicago, and I'm really happy with how everything has worked out, despite the difficult circumstances that brought me here. I found out yesterday that Jeff and Grace broke up about 2 weeks ago. According to what I heard through mutual friends, they couldn't handle the financial stress of living together without family support, and they started fighting constantly about money and their future plans. Grace is still pregnant and planning to have the baby, but she has moved back in with her parents, who have apparently decided to support her through the pregnancy, even though they disapprove of how it happened. Jeff sent me an email yesterday. That was so shocking, I can hardly believe he actually wrote it. He blamed me for the fact that their baby is going to grow up in a broken home. He claimed that my decision to divorce him forced Grace to raise the child as a single mother. He argued that if I had been more understanding about their relationship, and found a way to work out a financial arrangement that allowed him to continue his medical treatments, he and Grace could have stayed together and provided a stable home for their child. The email also included a long paragraph about gender, double standards, and how unfair it was that I faced no consequences for slapping him, while he was being punished for his emotional mistake with Grace. Jeff insisted that if the roles were reversed and he had slapped me, everyone would be calling for his arrest. He seemed to think that people believed my violence was justified because I was the one wronged in the affair. I chose not to respond to Jeff's email, as there was no point in engaging with his attempts to guilt me for decisions that he and Grace made without considering the consequences. The fact that their relationship fell apart as soon as they lost financial support only proves that their feelings for each other weren't strong enough to overcome practical challenges. This makes his claims about finding true love seem even more ridiculous. My new job in Chicago has been going really well. I'm making friends with my coworkers and enjoying having a social life again. It's been liberating not to constantly worry about medical bills and insurance coverage, and to have my entire salary available for my own needs and goals. Instead of sending most of it overseas to support someone who is betraying my trust, I'm looking forward to finalizing the divorce in a few months, and officially closing this chapter of my life. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm living for myself, instead of sacrificing everything for people who didn't deserve my generosity.